Hello, California, and welcome to this week's edition of Your Financial Compass, the show that's dedicated to helping you navigate successfully to and through your retirement. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and joining me in the studio is Chris Bulman. He is the founder and a financial advisor at Bulman Wealth Group, and we have financial advisor Scott Vlahon. Chris, Scott, friends, it's great to see you. What's on your minds this week?
Probably on our minds is makeup. Are we not moving too much? I think we have a tendency to move, and we want to make sure we're not messing up the shot, or the Levi and the directors will get mad at us.
No.
Yes. They keep yelling in Kristen's ear, have Chris stop moving.
No, you guys are great.
Yeah.
We like to have a lot of fun on this show if you're new to us, but really at the end of the day, this show is about you and making sure that you are as prepared as possible for your retirement. So today we're going to be talking about an important subject, the 6 main retirement risks. Do you know what those 6 main risks are? We're going to unpack each one of them because we want to make sure that you avoid falling into some of the common mistakes that we often see people falling prey to as a result of these retirement risks. So you guys ready to get into it?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right. So risk number 1, we have to talk about inflation, inflationary risk. And this is something I think that is more, it's on the forefront of people's minds more today with what we see going on in our economic landscape.
I think I've joked about this in my previous shows, like when my mom calls me and said, Scotty, inflation, then it's probably a household term. It's always been there. Mm-hmm. Generally, it hovers in the 2 to 3% range. As we all know, that was not the case in 2022 for several factors, but last year it was in the 8% plus range. And as we joked when it wasn't a joke, when you get your groceries, coffee was 27% higher, rent is higher, all these things are higher. And it's always been a risk, but lately it's been even more of a risk. And it's gotten, in a roundabout way, it's nice because it's on everyone's radar, just do this dramatic leap. But then it brings back into that fear, which is always the number one fear for people and retirees, is running out of money.
Right.
When that money is not retaining its purchasing power because of inflation, it just brings that concern back to the forefront. So just being aware of it, what does it mean? Do we adjust our spending? Do we adjust all these different factors? The good news is it won't always stay where it was. It was in the 8% range last year. I think the September report, it was down to 3.6, 3.7. Still higher, but not as high as it was last year.
So how are you supporting your clients through this? I mean, obviously, I know that, what you do for people is you build a solid plan in place so that they can account for things like inflation. But how are you supporting your clients despite what's happening out there with inflation?
Yeah, I mean, regular meetings is really important. Regular communication through our emails, our blogs, our website, our television show, podcast.
Yep.
But regular meetings are important. And if you look at a lot of listeners and viewers out there can probably remember the 80s when they had interest rates. And they thought, oh, we have 9 or 10 or 11% rates, and these will last forever. And then next thing you know, rates are down to, the number one, if you had bonds, they're getting called. So now your 10% tax-free California bond is, they give you your money back and say reinvest it at 5% or 6% and then 4%. So it's important to understand that rates are going up, and you should take advantage of these rates.
Yeah, because this is the second risk we're talking about now, interest rate risk, right?
Yeah.
Which goes hand in hand with inflation as well.
Yeah, and we have to take advantage of that idle money or that safe money to make sure that we are getting the best rates when they're available. So if you have money sitting on the sideline at your bank, and I know a lot of our clients do, a lot of the people that call us do, people will come in and say, as I'm going through our questions, I'll say, well, how much do you have in the bank and checking, savings, CDs? Oh, 300,000, 500,000. And it's earning 0.15%. Interest rates, you can get 4, 5.5% in savings, money market accounts. Now, that could be for the short term. If interest rates come back down next year, you're going to see that come back. But while it's there, you should be taking advantage of it for the money that you have in those safe accounts. And the other thing is, if you want to kind of lock those rates in for a while, there are investments you can get 5, 6% fixed for the next 5, 7, 9 years, guaranteed. So through different, whether it's CDs, you're going to get probably 4 to 5.5% at best. Fixed annuity rates, you're going to get 6, 7%. So you want to know what's available and make sure you're taking advantage of it. But then also having your segments of money available for growth, because the growth will occur. And when it occurs, generally, by the time, if you're not in the market, when you want to get in the market to get it, you've already missed the upswing.
Right.
Exactly. Well, and it's so important to know what you need that money for, because I think a lot of people hesitate, at least a money market account, it's completely liquid. Your fridge goes out. We were just talking about that before the show, right? We both have had to replace refrigerators recently. You want to know that you can dip into that money that's liquid that you can get into when you have an emergency. But I think some people are hesitant with CDs and with annuities. But again, if you don't need that money to be your completely safe liquid money, then those can be really valuable vehicles to be using.
It's in that, and hopefully those smart fridges weren't very smart, were they? But it's about, what is the purpose? Because where the money is can also, if it's planned out, can help dictate what that money's for. As you said, maybe there's liquid money for the broken fridge, for the AC that went out, for the tires that went out. Because generally you don't want to dip into investment accounts for those if you don't have to.
Right.
So money in the CD, generally we don't want to pull from, so there's timing components to CDs, to annuities, to cash, to investment accounts, but we can earmark different accounts for different things, so we're not having to, for the folks like last year in 2022, when the market was dropping and they were trying to pull, that was also doubling as an emergency account when something came up. That's when we get into bigger issues. So knowing what the money's for, what purpose is it serving, even in terms of the different accounts, can bring a little bit of clarity where you're not, it removes a lot of that extra panic of, well, gosh, I had to pull an extra $20,000 for this, even though that account dropped $30,000 last month.
Right.
So it's compartmentalizing them, so everything, we always joke about fantasy football. Everyone's there to play a role. The money can do the same thing with these accounts.
Absolutely. Well, that helps you mitigate interest rate risk, which is the second risk we're talking about.
And Chris, I'll beat him to it. With interest rate risk, brings up opportunities like refinancing annuities.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you own a fixed annuity right now, for example, or a fixed index annuity or a variable annuity for that matter, and you're wondering if it could perform better, if you've been sitting on the sidelines wondering, interest rates keep rising, what does that mean for my portfolio? Should I have more money in cash? Taking advantage of these 4.5%, 5.5% rates. Should I change my portfolio? Maybe you've been thinking, interest rates keep rising, the stock market's been volatile or falling, what should I do? And you haven't done anything yet. This is the perfect time. Yeah. Call the number below, click on the link, and give us a call and get a plan done and understand how all of these different factors fit in. I think this is as good a time as ever with these interest rates up the way they are to have a second look at your portfolio and see how these rates can change and can help impact your portfolio to potentially make it safer, potentially give you more growth, more stability, and if you don't have that plan in place, to get the plan in place for the first time.
It's not the time for inaction. You said it perfectly.
For sure. Well, Chris, Scott, thank you so much. And to our viewers at home, that number to call, as Chris mentioned, to get your very own complimentary financial compass review, it's there on the bottom of your screen. Simply call 888-970-4685, or you're also welcome to take out your smartphone. You can open up that camera app, just click and scan that QR code in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. That will take you over to a landing page, ask you a few short, simple questions, and a member of the team from Bulman Wealth Group will reach out to you to connect with you to schedule your complimentary meeting that way as well. We've covered 2 of the 6 main retirement risks. Do you know what the other 4 are? Stay with us. We'll be back with more right after this.
As a good saver, you've been putting away money during your working years. Studies find that the biggest fear of retirees is running out of money. Market volatility isn't just the downward movement of stock prices, it's the size and frequency of change. The more dramatic the ups and downs, the higher the volatility. This can put savers who are newly retired or a few years away from being retired at greater risk. Today's generation of retirees is not receiving traditional pensions as our parents or grandparents did. Instead, we have retirement accounts such as 401ks or 403bs. These accounts typically expose your money to market risk. The last thing you want right before retirement is to lose a portion of the money you need for income. But how do you turn these accounts into a retirement income? Is it safe to keep all your retirement money sitting in the stock market? The last thing you want is to lose a portion of the money you need for income due to market loss. By working with a financial professional, you can learn how to turn a portion of your savings into an income stream for life and income for the life of your spouse if you're married. We all have moments in our lives when we wish we had taken action sooner. Don't let procrastination reign on your retirement parade. Act now before it's too late. Please call our office to set up your no-cost, no-obligation retirement income review today.
Well, welcome back. You're watching Your Financial Compass with Chris Bulman and Scott Vlahon from Bulman Wealth Group. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley. We are talking on today's show about the 6 main retirement risks and what you need to know about them and how you can mitigate those risks. Because the reality is that we can't eliminate all risk when it comes to financial planning, right? I mean, there's just so many unknown variables out there, so many different kinds of risks. But our job and our goal is to help mitigate those risks for you. So next up on the list, the third one we're going to talk about is market volatility.
Everyone's favorite.
Oh yes, it's a hot topic for sure, isn't it?
It is, and we've talked about this before. If you've invested in the market for years, you know there's going to be volatility, but you always forget how much it stings, and you kind of get complacent, and then it pops up again. You're like, this is. But it also depends on how old you are, because we meet with folks all the time that they come in and they feel like their investment portfolio is lower risk, and they think it matches their preferences. Then we run reports and find out that it's not the case. So it's better to find out then. As we've stated before, it's understanding. What does Warren Buffett say? Why would you risk what you need for something you don't have? And as you get it, if you've planned properly and you're getting into retirement, normally you shouldn't have to take as much risk as you might have someone like my age, 43, where I'm trying to gain. You reach a certain age where hopefully you're just looking to preserve and live off of that money. So is your portfolio matching and adhering to your stage of life, to your comfort level, so the years like 2022 don't sting as much. But it's also understanding that the marketplace changes. And when I say that, it means the ingredients that someone like Chris or I can utilize. And we've referenced annuities before. There's different kind of funds. We use buffer funds that, it's like this, we've had these buffer funds for years, like Chris's bell bottoms. You never thought he'd need them. He gets invited to a 70s party, and lo and behold, they're still there.
Yep.
But it's about still having the tool and using it when it's the right time.
Yes.
So in 2022, we started using these buffer funds, and we could do a whole show on them, but it's a way to mitigate risk within a portfolio. So it's understanding what tools are out there instead of just saying, well, this is how it goes, and it'll always come back.
Yep.
Our clients at age 70 don't want to hear us tell them, well, it's always going to come back. That's not the right answer.
Time is not on your side at that point,
Yeah, and Warren Buffett says, why risk something you have for something you don't need?
You don't need, right.
He also says, and this has changed over time, I feel like, but he says, if you can't own a stock for 10 years, you shouldn't own it for 10 minutes. And I think the thinking has changed over these past few years with things like the FANG stocks, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, and Scott's favorite of all time, Bitcoin.
That's what I really want to talk about today.
But people get in this sort of frame of reference thinking you're supposed to become an overnight billionaire.
Right.
And some people do, but 99% of people don't. And
you never hear about the horror stories. You only hear about the few, right?
And all the people that were bragging about those stories, a few years ago, where
are they now?
So, and who knows what's going to happen in the future with Bitcoin? But that's not how you want to build your retirement plan.
Right.
On Bitcoin or just
because again,
all
why
in
would
one
you
place.
risk what you have for something that you may not need?
For something that you may not need.
Right,
yes.
for sure. Well, and to your point, I love that you guys shared. Some people just assume, well, this is the way it is. And in 2022, a lot of people lost a lot of money, but not everybody did, and it wasn't necessary. I think that's what you're talking about, is preventing these big time losses from occurring. Because if with the proper planning in place, you can mitigate that risk of market volatility.
Well, I think of a story. There's clients I've worked with for several years, and when we started working together, we kind of repositioned some of their portfolio. Some of it was in the market where obviously it can go up and down, and then we had put some safer measures in place. And when we did that, it made sense. And then we fast forwarded a year, the market was up, their investments doing well, the safer stuff was kind of boring. Like, oh, Scott, we know why we did it, but we're kind of second guessing it. I said, I hear you. It won't always be the case. We fast forward to 2022, market's dropping, their investments dropped a little, but that safer portion didn't lose anything. And they're like, Okay, now we remember.
Right.
Not everything's going to be hitting all at the same time. You think of sports, not all 5 starters on the basketball team are going to be shooting lights out unless they're the Warriors, hopefully. But that aside, it's where does everything fit into that, the role that it's supposed to play in understanding, the different.
Yeah, and if I could throw in some quick math, because that's what I love to do. I want you to think about this. If your portfolio drops 10%, Alyssa, if it drops 10%, you have to get about 11, 12% to come back to where you were.
Right.
But if it drops 20%, imagine if you have $1 million and you drop to 800,000. Now you have to get 25%. In other words, 25% of 800,000 is 200,000 to get back to where you started. Now, if you drop 50%, you have to get 100% to get just back to where you started. So
that percentage math gets you every time.
Yes, and so what a lot of people don't realize is when they look at the stock market, they go, oh, the stock market made 32% this year. Well, what did it do the year previous? Because usually that's or 40%. Right. It's coming off of a 20 or 30% loss.
Right.
So it's not even getting back to where it was. And that's what I think a lot of people need to understand as you get into your 50s, 60s, 70s. You don't have to have those 30% returns if you never have the 20 and 30% losses.
Right.
So if you compare those losses, minimize the downturns, you never have to have the big upturns. In other words, another way of saying it is you never have to take a big step forward if you don't take a big step backwards.
Absolutely. This is a perfect segue to our next risk, because so many folks are concerned about outliving their money. That is the number one concern. I know when I've traveled the country and worked as a financial educator, the number one question people have is, am I going to be okay? And at the heart of that question is really, do I have enough money to last me throughout the rest of my life? So that brings us to this fourth main risk that we need to talk about, which is longevity risk, because we are living longer than we ever have before, which means our money has to last that much longer.
Yeah, and some of that brings up some real honest conversations with ourselves as we're segueing. Maybe we're at a certain stage of life and taking stock of what your budget is. And generally people have a good vision of it, and sometimes like, I've never budgeted, I never had to. Well, then they get into a certain stage of life where they're forced to, or like, maybe you don't eat. Chris always says we don't want to be the advisors that say no Starbucks today,
right.
And we don't. But sometimes we need to look in the mirror and be like, what is my getting a grasp on our budget? Are we spending too much on certain things, especially with inflation the way it's been? So having an honest conversation with maybe our spouse or loved ones to see what is our, maybe we don't go on as, maybe when times are rougher, a year like last year, maybe, or costs are higher, or flights were more expensive, maybe we'd reduce our travel. But, we don't want to be those guys that poo-poo everything and, you can only eat ramen noodles to keep down costs. So it's all part of the bigger plan and how it all fits together.
Yeah, and especially ramen noodles, because it's high carb, makes you bloated, and don't look good on TV.
Not good.
That's what I was going to have for lunch, but now I changed my mind.
No, but to your point, I think what you love doing, and one of the things I know that really sets Bulman Wealth Group apart is that they love doing life with their clients. They love doing life with you, the good, the bad, and everything in between. But you're helping, like when folks have goals, what you're doing is saying, okay, you want to make these things happen? Let's see how we can make it happen. To your point, it's not telling people what they can't do in retirement. It's telling them what they can do. Yeah. But part of that comes down to needing to know where the money's going so that you can make a solid plan to account for those things.
We always say this when we do our dinner seminars. We say when we're talking with someone for the first time, we want to find out, what keeps them up at night with anxiety, but what also gets you up in the morning excited. Is it a trip to the Taylor Swift concert like you got to go to? Chris wishes you could have gone.
I just watched the Chiefs game because we see her there too.
We saw her more than the players.
I think NFL ratings have gone through the roof since that started.
So Taylor Swift is a different episode.
Right.
But it's now I lost my train of thought. But in terms of planning,
what helps you sleep well at night?
If we can figure out those things, then where does the anxiety come from? Where does the fun come from?
Right.
And we can figure out ways to address both. The rest falls into place in terms of risk and budgeting and tax.
Yeah, and one of the things when we're sitting with people, this is, I think this is important. There's no point in being the richest person in the cemetery, right? Yeah. So if there's a way to live more life, experience more life with your family, experience more life with your kids, your grandkids along the way, instead of just, I always say, I don't want to die with the most money. I want to experience it, give it, leave a legacy, enjoy it, and see my kids and my grandchildren eventually enjoy it. That's what's important in life. And I think that's what we've seen over time planning with our clients, that's what's important to them as well.
For sure. Well, and that's what you do, is helping folks navigate these risks so that they can live out those goals and dreams.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. Well, we are going to take a quick break, but again, that number to call to get your own financial compass review, it's completely complimentary. Call that number on the bottom of your screen, 888-970-4685. Again, this is for no cost, no charge, no obligation. It's simply an invitation to have a conversation to see how Chris and Scott and the team of Bulman Wealth can help and serve you. Or you can scan that QR code down in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and that will get you connected as well. We've covered 4 of the 6 main retirement risks. When we come back, we'll cover the final 2. Stay with us.
I became a financial advisor coming out of the tough times of the tech bubble in the late 90s, early 2000s. Moved to California, uprooted my life, changed everything, and then 9/11 happened the first week in this industry. I was prepared already to help people from tough times coming out of the tech bubble, but what we didn't expect is there were 3 years in a row when I started of the market dropping. That really impacted my whole career. It crafted and created how we manage money. We don't want our clients to ever lose like that, and so everything we do is built on protection. The goal of our practice and the people that we meet with is to remove the fear and uncertainty that we all face, and it goes back to those first years in the market.
I was a sportscaster on television. I grew up in Flint, Michigan. In TV, you bounce around, and went to Mississippi and worked at the NBC station there and covered, college football's big, NFL's big, all that stuff. And a guy I knew relatively well in a different state decided to get out of TV, and in this opportunity I always enjoyed finance and money, and it seemed really exciting. I like to communicate to folks and feel like I can communicate well. It was such a fresh, kind of different career than what I was used to that it was exciting.
We go into every meeting with no place to get. We're there to meet with you, to discover your needs, find out where you are at that point, and how we can help you build and craft that plan for the future.
Welcome back to Your Financial Compass. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and I'm joined by Chris Bulman and Scott Vlahon from Bulman Wealth Group. We are talking on today's episode about the 6 main retirement risks. We've talked about the first 4, and it's important just to re-presence that we know that we have no control over these risks, right? That there always are going to be risks out there, but what we're trying to do is help eliminate and mitigate as much as possible so that people aren't subjected to more risk than they need to be. But this 5th risk is probably the one we all have the least amount of control over. That's legislative risk. So let's talk about it, what it is, why it's so critical.
So we always like to have someone to blame. Like Chris blames me for his outfit choice today, and it's his wife's fault. Anyhow, it's fun to blame the government for things, and I like to get on that train. Legislative risk are these things where there's always rumors of change or different policies, and how does that affect, like Social Security is going to be changing. We know, that'll be its own show, but there's that aspect.
We had the Secure 2.0 Act earlier
the Secure
in
Act of,
2023.
When do I start my RMD? Now it's 2 years later or 5 years later than it was going to be.
Right.
Healthcare issues, business policies, all of these things, or even the rumors of these things, rumors of a government shutdown, can have an effect on finances, can have an effect on the stock market and our investments. And as you said, Kristen, 99% of it is out of our control. So what things, that 1% that we can control, what can we do? And another thing that we always say, Chris and I think taxes are going to go up. I would imagine the majority of viewers think so too. That is probably going to be the biggest legislative issue of the rising taxes.
Yeah, when you look, and this isn't just in America, around the world, so much free money was printed. And by the way, towards the end of 2023, I think we'll see a lot of that money coming to the end. And then what, right? And so you're going to see businesses struggling a bit. You're going to see money rates to borrow money for business higher. So it makes it tougher for businesses to grow. Government, interest rates on the government debt going up and up. And so what are they going to have to do? They're going to have to, most likely, I never like to say for sure because you never know what the government's going to do. But if we were to take a poll of all the viewers, 80% of people say taxes are going to go up in the future. Now, do they go up on the rich? Did they go up on the middle class? If they go up on the rich, they go up on the middle class, because guess what? It passes down.
Yes.
Yeah. And so if it goes up on businesses, there's that whole train, let's tax the corporations. Well, corporations will just raise costs on everything.
Right.
And so it's a tax on all of us. And so that is going to happen. And so we want to make sure that we understand in the future as we're taking income, how much of that income is going to be taxed. And then especially as we get into our 70s, and a lot of viewers out there, maybe you're 60 or 55 and you're thinking about, when am I going to retire? Or maybe I am retired, but I've got this big IRA and I don't want to start taking it because I have a pension or I have other income. And so maybe this is a great time to do a Roth conversion so that you can start getting these taxes. Most people don't understand, but taxes are on sale right now until they go up. So if we can start getting out these taxes out of the way over time, over the next, until we're 72, 73, then by the time taxes go up, maybe we've gotten most of those out of the way.
Right.
And we've
gotten rid of that silent partner, right?
Yeah. And Scott can talk to, because he talks about it every week or two in his presentations that he does around the community. The tax dollars that go to, or the cents out of every dollar that goes to pay for government needs, it's not enough.
Yeah, so there was a study, 2019, that I think at the time, 66 cents of every tax dollar collected went to cover Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, interest on our debt. They predict that by 2027, that number might be 92, 93 cents. Even if they're wrong and it's 82, well, that means 18 cents for all these other things from,
Every other thing that we need.
Everything,
Right.
NASA, Chris's favorite, the IRS. How the heck are we going to cover all those things? There's only two ways they can remedy it: cut their spending. Okay, haha, that's not going to happen. Two, increase our taxes. So it's, that's coming back to the whole legislative element and risk.
No, for sure. Well, gosh, we only have a minute and a half left in the show. We got to just presence the sixth risk, which is sequence of returns risk. And Chris, you kind of talked on this a little bit earlier when you were doing that percentage math calculation.
Oh, you want more numbers? So if you think of the sequence of returns, most people don't take this into account.
Right.
But if you look at the last 30 years, let's say, or from 1980 to 2010, and you take all those returns in the stock market each year and you stack them from top to bottom, let's say the average return was 10%. Well, let's say you reversed them all. So now 2010 and backwards, you stack them all, divide by 30, it's 10%. The difference is if you retired in 1980 and started taking income, you had 20 years basically of increased returns before you hit that 10-year debacle of the lost decade. Now, if it was reversed, you would have run out of money in about 14 years.
Yeah, if you were retiring right
So
then.
the sequence of returns is so important, and we need to make sure that we have a plan that accounts for the sequence of returns.
So much to take into consideration. I am so grateful that you are out there being able to serve your community and help them navigate these important retirement risks. So Scott, Chris, thank you so much to our viewers at home. Again, that number to call for your complimentary financial compass review, 888-970-4685. Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to being back with you next week.